Hi, I'm Thomas Bowles, Prince William County Agricultural Extension Agent. Welcome to our video.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this evening for Native Flowers, Fruit, and Foliage for Fall. Many gardeners think of spring and summer as the times when their gardens are really showing at their best. But I'd like to illustrate in tonight's presentation that there are many categories of native plants that can add beautiful ornamental interest to our gardens, as well as providing wonderful support for our wildlife. So I'd like to begin just really quickly reviewing some of the benefits of using native plants specifically, and then we'll be looking at all these types of plant species for the fall. The perennials will also include some of the shorter plants that you might consider as ground covers. Then the grasses, and then three categories of woody plants, the vines, shrubs, and trees. Folks often want to know where they can purchase plants, so I'll be sharing information about that and then taking your questions at the end. I hope that many of you were able to see the handout that was sent in the latest email that had the Zoom link. And that handout is a two-sided document. It has a list of all the plants that I will be discussing this evening. So if you were able to print it out, for example, you'll be able to follow along, take notes, or just make a flag for plants that are of interest to you. One thing I'd like to note is that in addition to listing both the common and scientific names, there are actually links for those plants that will take you to fact sheets. Most of them are fact sheets like this on our Master Gardeners of Northern Virginia website. And there you'll see all of the details on the plants, those that I'll be sharing as we discuss the plants this evening. But in addition, lots more tips on growing and maintaining the plants. If you go to the website, you will also see many captioned seasonal photos, as well as videos of pollinators in action for many of the plants. So let's discuss very briefly the benefits of using native plants. First of all, they're suited to our local types of soil, the hydrology, the water systems, as well as the climate. And very importantly, native plants have evolved for a long period of time with the local fauna. They're going to be able to provide nectar and pollen for our pollinators. They can serve as what we refer to as host plants for Lepidoptera, that is the butterflies, skippers, moths. Host plants are those that the adult Lepidoptera may visit for nectar, but then the females will return, lay their eggs on the plants, and then the caterpillar stage, this next generation of those insects, will be able to feed on the foliage of those plants, and then that will help those species continue. Native plants also provide fruit and seeds for wildlife, as well as cover for a variety of animals. Let's begin looking at the perennials. And there are three categories of herbaceous plants that I consider really top-notch plants for the fall. Doug Tallamy, the entomologist from the University of Delaware, refers to these as keystone perennials. And the very top-rated ones are the goldenrods in the Solidago genus. They're the #1 keystone genus, hosting 115 species of butterflies and moths. #2 are the asters. They are in the Symphyiotrichum and the Eurybia genera, and they host, as a group, 112 Lepidoptera species. And then #3 are the sunflowers, Helianthus genus, and they host 73 species of butterflies and moths. So we'll begin looking at some examples of these particular keystone perennials. Under goldenrods, the first are the rough stem goldenrods, Solidago rugosa. The fireworks cultivar is a particularly popular one. This is a bushy, upright clumping plant growing about 2 to 3 feet tall and wide in sun to part shade. It likes moist soil but can tolerate a range of soil moistures. It can spread slowly by rhizomes, and luckily deer seldom severely damage it. One important thing to remember is that the goldenrods as a group do not cause the seasonal allergies. It's ragweed, which is wind pollinated with inconspicuous flowers, that causes those allergies. The goldenrods have very sticky, heavy pollen, and they're going to rely on our pollinators, the insects, to carry that pollen from plant to plant. Rough-stemmed goldenrod has narrow-toothed leaves, and that foliage will host many moth species. The plant has tiny composite flowers from August all the way into November, attracting many types of pollinators. The seeds that result are enjoyed by birds. This plant is very attractive, used in borders. This is the example of a border at the front of the home of one of our master gardeners in Northern Virginia. Could also be used in meadows as well as butterfly gardens. There are several other goldenrod species that do well for us in Northern Virginia, and they are important late season nectar sources. One of my favorites is blue-stemmed or wreath goldenrod, Solidago cassia. This grows 18 to 36 inches tall with very graceful arching stems. It's very well behaved, not overly aggressive in its spreading, and it does quite well on dry woodland edges. Another great goldenrod is gray goldenrod, Solidago nemoralis. It's a little shorter, growing anywhere from 6 to 24 inches with nodding flower plumes, and it is noteworthy in that it's hardy and drought tolerant. Another goldenrod of interest is false goldenrod, Solidago sfacellata. The golden fleece cultivar is especially popular. It has these very interesting multi-branched panicles. The plant as a whole grows about 12 to 18 inches tall, and it can actually be used when it's not in bloom as a ground cover plant because it has mat-like basal rosettes. Moving on to the asters, the number 2 genus, Symphyotrichum novae is New England aster, a tall, upright plant growing anywhere from 1 to 6 feet. Several stems will appear from a single crown. This plant can grow in sun to part shade, likes moist soil, and deer may occasionally damage it. New England aster has showy composite flowers. That means that there are the central disc flowers and then what we think of as the petals. Those are the ray flowers. And you'll see these lovely shades of purple from August to October. These have numerous pollinators, and the foliage will provide nourishment for the pearl crescent butterfly. You can use New England aster in borders, as I'm showing here. This is our Simpson demonstration garden. It also does well in meadows, butterfly, or rain gardens. The photo on the right shows the purple dome cultivar, which has a more mounding habit, not as tall and gangly, and it grows about 18 to 24 inches tall, making it perfect for our pocket-size tribute garden. One thing to note about the purple dome is that in pollinator trials, it did not attract as many pollinators as the straight species did. So just keep that in mind. But if you only have room for a smaller plant, perhaps you might want to consider the purple dome. One of my favorite asters is aromatic aster, Symphyotrichum oblongifolium. I like it because it's much shorter, 1 to 3 feet tall and wide, and it has a very bushy, mounding globe shape. This does best in full sun, can take dry to moist soil, tolerating drought, dry and rocky soil, and even poor soil, and it's largely deer resistant. It's referred to as aromatic aster because the leaves have a balsam-like scent, and they appear on very densely branched stems. This plant is a host to Lepidoptera. The flowers are going to be a very important late pollen and nectar source all the way from August into even mid-November. There are several very popular cultivars. One that's been around for quite some time is Radon's favorite, growing 2 to 3 feet tall. This plant was top rated in a 6-year study by Chicago Botanical Garden in their plant evaluation program. But October Skies, a more compact plant, actually was top ranked in both Penn State and Mount Cuba's plant trials. In other words, not only did the plant grow in a very nice manner, but it attracted a greater number of pollinators. In fact, October Skies outranked both Radon's favorite and the straight species in those trials. Aromatic aster can be used in rock gardens or the front of borders. This is how we use it in the Glen Carlin demonstration garden that I helped to manage. This particular aster will slowly colonize by stolons, those above ground stems. And that makes it ideal for low maintenance plantings on slopes. This particular photo was taken at Brookside Gardens in Maryland. And this shows my garden. Here it is blooming in mid-November when just about everything else has finished blooming, and I consider it a great native substitute for non-native chrysanthemums. Another nice aster is whitewood aster, Eurybia divaricata. This is a loose clumping plant growing anywhere from 6 to 36 inches tall. This is going to be one better suited to the shady parts of our gardens, part shade to full shade. It can grow in dry to moist soil, actually tolerates drought, and can bloom in dense shade, and is fairly deer resistant. Whitewood aster has heart-shaped basal leaves, and then the leaves on the stems are more lance-like. This foliage will provide nourishment for both the pearl crescent and the silvery checker spot butterflies. And then in the fall, we see these lovely flat-topped flower clusters of white flowers all the way from July into October, attracting butterflies. And then the seed heads in October will feed juncos and goldfinches. Whitewood aster can be used on shady slopes to control erosion. Here it's used as a ground cover under trees in the parking lot gardens at Brookside. And I use it under shrubs in my garden. And here it's a very nice, very loose edging along a wooded path at the National Arboretum, Fern Valley. As well as whitewood aster, we have blue wood aster, Symphyiotrichum cordifolium. It grows 2 to 3 feet tall and wide with upright branched stems. This one can grow from sun to part shade, but it's going to do best with at least 3 hours of sun to prevent it bending toward the light. It can grow in dry to moist soil, tolerating drought, as well as rabbits and deer. Blue wood aster, similar to the white wood aster, has heart-shaped basal leaves, and the leaves on the upper stems will be small and ovate, hosting the pearl crescent butterfly. You'll see these lovely composite flowers from August to October, attracting many pollinators. What's interesting is that the disc flowers, those in the center, will be yellow at the beginning of their bloom, and as they are pollinated, they will be turning this a deeper maroon color. Blue wood aster will colonize both by rhizomes and by spreading seed, which makes it ideal for naturalizing in open shade gardens and woodlands. Another aster that has come to my attention recently is the snow flurry cultivar of heath aster, Symphyiotrichum ericoides. This is a prostrate form of what we usually think of as a very airy 3-foot tall species, but this is dense and branching with somewhat woody stems. It's only about 4 to 6 inches high, but it will spread across 2 to 4 feet, making it a really great ground cover. This is going to prefer generally full sun, can tolerate filtered shade, and it's definitely going to prefer dry, well-drained soil. It's tolerant of drought and black walnut. This is one plant that, because of this preference for well-drained soil, has not been doing well in some of our gardens with this long period of rain that we had just before this dry spell that we're going through right now. So if you use this plant, you want to be sure to plant it in such a way that the water will be able to drain away rather than just having it sit around those roots and rotting out. Note that deer may nibble the young leaves of this plant. Snow flurry has stiff and linear basal leaves that emerge in March, and then it will send out these woody stems. They have needle-like leaves, having somewhat the look of heather or a ground-covered juniper. And then from September to October, you'll see very dense sprays of tiny daisy-like flowers. They attract a wide number of pollinators. Snow flurry creates a weed-free mat. I mentioned that it spreads across 2 to 4 feet. It makes it really ideal for border fronts and edging. We use it that way in the parking lot garden at Glen Carlin Demonstration Garden. At Mount Cuba, they've demonstrated how you can use it in rock gardens and water-wise landscapes. And it even makes a really nice spiller component in container plantings. And then finally, our last type of the keystone plants, this is woodland sunflower, Helianthus divaricatus. This is a shrubby, woody-based plant growing anywhere from 2 to 6 feet tall. It does quite well in part shade and dry to moist soil, tolerating drought. Deer and rabbits may occasionally nibble it. Woodland sunflower has long, lance-shaped leaves, and these provide nourishment to many Lepidoptera. The buds will be showing you a dense cluster of the disc flowers, but then when they open up, you'll see the long ray flowers as well, the yellow rays. And these composite flowers bloom all the way from July to September, attracting many pollinators, including a specialist bee. And the clusters of seeds will be enjoyed by birds. Woodland sunflower can be grown in partly shaded borders, along woodland edges, and in naturalized plantings where colonies will provide wildlife cover. Now we can move along to some other perennials listed about the middle of the first page of your handout, and these I'm going to introduce in bloom sequence. So earliest blooming will be hairy alum root, Heuchera villosa. I particularly like the autumn bride cultivar because of its especially showy flowers. Hairy alum root has a rounded clumping form and grows anywhere from 18 to 36 inches tall and wide. This can grow all the way from sun to shade. It generally likes moist soil that's kept evenly moist to avoid decline. And I find here in Northern Virginia that the foliage remains evergreen even through ice and snow. And luckily it is deer resistant. The autumn bride cultivar has large toothed leaves. As I mentioned, they remain through the winter, and very airy panicles from June into October, attracting bees and butterflies. I love the look of these striking seed heads when the sun hits them, and they will last through the winter. Alum root can be massed in a woodland to control erosion. At the Glen Carlin Demonstration Garden, we use it as a foundation planting, and one of my Master Gardener colleagues uses it as a base under shrubs and an edging for walkways. Blue vervain, Verbena hustata, is a very graceful, erect, clump-forming plant. It can grow anywhere from 18 inches all the way to 5 feet tall in sun to part shade. This particular plant is going to prefer moist to wet, rich soil, and it will actually tolerate temporary standing water. But on the other hand, once it's established, it can tolerate moderate drought. Deer seldom severely damage it, but apparently rabbits may eat the young foliage. Blue vervain has narrow leaves on stout, square stems, and the leaves will provide nourishment for the verbena moth. These lovely tubular flowers appear on candelabra-like spikes from June to October, attracting many pollinators. And then the resulting seeds in these nutlets are enjoyed by birds in the fall. Blue vervain can be used in mixed borders, as we do in our sunny demonstration garden, in meadows, as well as rain gardens or near streams or ponds because of that preference for a higher level of soil moisture. One of my preferred species of Joe Pye weed is the coastal plain Joe Pye weed, Eutrochium dubium. This is a little shorter, still 2 to 5 feet tall, but a little shorter than some of the other species. It grows in upright form with unbranched stems. Its sun preference is from full sun to part shade, and it also likes moist to wet, humus-rich soil, tolerating clay and wet soil. Deer rarely damage it. One of the popular cultivars is Little Joe, which reaches only 3 to 4 feet tall. This particular plant is one with multi-season interest. The ovate leaves grow in whorls and host various moths, and they will appear on speckled purple stems. The flowers grow in very large dome-shaped clusters from July to September, attracting bees and butterflies. And the particular form of the flower clusters, that dome shape, is ideal as a landing platform for butterflies. And then these fluffy seed heads will appear from October into November, and I find them especially lovely when they're covered with ice and snow. Coastal plain Joe Pye weed can be used in naturalized areas, in borders and cottage gardens, meadows, as well as wetlands and the central part of rain gardens. There are quite a few cultivars of garden phlox, Phlox paniculata. Here I'm singling out Gina. This is a naturally occurring variant that was discovered in Tennessee. It grows 2 to 4 feet tall in sun to part shade and moist soil. And it's notable for a particularly long bloom period, all the way from July into October. This particular cultivar performed in an outstanding manner in the Mount Cuba pollinator trials. And it was also noteworthy because of its mildew-free foliage. It's excellent for use in pollinator gardens. I was lucky enough to have swallowtail butterflies visiting a planting in my front yard. Another plant that I really enjoy from late summer into the fall is spotted bee balm, Monarda punctata. This is a clump-forming plant, somewhat short-lived, but it can reseed to continue with a presence in your garden. It reaches anywhere from 18 to 24 inches tall, growing in sun to part shade and dry to moist soil. This particular plant actually tolerates poor soil and even drought. It's important to avoid overwatering and to provide good air circulation for this. And luckily, deer and rabbits seldom damage it. Spotted bee balm has lance-shaped leaves on the characteristic square stems. This is a member of the mint family. And the foliage is a host for several moth species. I really enjoy the look of the flowers. Now, the true flowers are the central part that you're seeing right here. They're yellow flowers, lipped flowers with purple speckles, and they appear in stacks with these alternating, very showy bracts, pink with green tips. And these will be seen anywhere from July into well into October. Mine are blooming prolifically right now in my garden here as we're getting into the third week of October. And these attract many pollinators. As you can see here, this carpenter bee is really enjoying seeking nectar, and then the pollen is being deposited on its back. And then songbirds will eat the resulting seeds. Spotted bee balm can be used in mixed beds and pollinator gardens, in meadows, and here it is in a curbside planting at Brookside Gardens in Maryland. Another good plant for fall is orange coneflower, Rudbeckia fulgida. This is sometimes referred to as a black-eyed Susan. An upright clumping plant anywhere from 1 to 3 feet tall. It grows in sun to part shade, dry to moist soil, and it's tolerant of heat, drought, and clay soil. Just be alert that it may be susceptible when deer are overpopulating an area. Orange coneflower has ovate leaves on hairy stems, and these will host the silvery checker spot butterfly. Then the composite flowers appear with their characteristic very dark disc florets. These will be drawing butterflies and other pollinators all the way from July into October, and birds will enjoy the resulting seeds. Coneflower can be massed in borders, used in cutting gardens and meadows. And goldsturm is a particularly popular cultivar. It's compact with brighter flowers. New York ironweed, Vernonia noveboracensis, is a very tall, upright plant reaching as tall as 8 feet, and several stems will grow from a single crown. This can also grow in sun to part shade, preferring moist to wet soil. Luckily, deer rarely damage it. New York ironweed has lance-shaped leaves on very sturdy stems, and these leaves will host the American lady butterfly. It has these stunning red-violet composite flowers at the tips of the stalks from August into October, and these will attract bees and butterflies, especially skippers. And then these fluffy seed heads will appear October into November, lasting on into the winter. New York ironweed, because of its preference for moister soil, can be used in rain gardens and beside streams, in meadows, butterfly gardens, or the back of borders. And I'd like to just mention here that for some of those taller plants, like the New England aster, for example, we can use pruning techniques to somewhat reduce the height. I personally begin cutting these plants back even by half beginning in May, and I may sometimes repeat that cutting back several times. This can be done up to, we usually say, the 4th of July. You don't want to be pinching the plant back beyond that point because then it may have an impact on the flowering. But the pinching back or the cutting back will result in the plant having a splitting of the stem. It will become more dense, more compact and dense. I like to refer to this book by Tracy DeSabato-Aust, The Well-Tended Perennial Garden, for reminders about how to do these pruning techniques and which species can handle them and when these techniques should be practiced. For those who don't want to go through the pruning back, you may want to choose another species of Vernonia. This is threadleaf ironweed, Vernonia lettermanii, the iron butterfly cultivar, mounding at 2 to 3 feet tall and wide, is especially favored. Now let's move on to take a look at some grasses for the fall. The first is river oats, Chasmanthium latifolium. This is an upright clumping grass, and it's a cool season grass. The native grasses, like our turf grasses, fall into two categories, the cool season and the warm season grasses. The cool season grasses will get a very early start, and they will actually be flowering in July. This particular one grows 2 to 5 feet tall in sun to part shade. It can tolerate a range of soil types, dry to wet soil, tolerating shade as well, and salt and black walnut. One important note is that this particular plant spreads quite aggressively via self-seeding and underground rhizomes. So you want to think carefully about if you're going to introduce it, and if you do, where to introduce it in your garden. What I enjoy about river oats is that it has very attractive seed heads through the seasons. In July, you see them very green, and they're absolutely beautiful when they're backlit by the sun. Then in August, they'll begin to turn pink. Then as fall comes on, they'll be turning tan. And they continue to linger on for winter interest. What I love about the grasses in general is that in addition to these wonderful effects of light, when wind blows through them, you have a wonderful sense of motion. You even hear a rustling of those seed heads. So it really brings a garden to life. River oats, because of that more aggressive spread, is very effective when used on slopes for erosion control. You can mass it in borders as well as rain gardens, or use it in those dry hell strips right by the curb. Another very popular grass in the horticulture trade these days is switchgrass, Panicum virgatum. This is a clumping warm season grass. That means it will get a little bit of a later start and will be flowering in the fall. Switchgrass has a vase-shaped habit and a very extensive, very deep root system, making it quite drought tolerant. It grows anywhere from 3 to 6 feet tall in sun to part shade. It likes dry to moist, lean soil. By that, I mean soil that is not overly rich with a lot of an organic component. You actually want to also avoid excess shade and water, because that will tend to make the plant flop. The grasses in general are deer resistant. Switchgrass has a strong multi-season presence. Here it is at the beginning of its growth in the late spring to early summer with its arching green leaves. And these will host skippers and satyr butterflies. It has very distinctive, airy, pink-tinged flower spikes. You'll see those beginning in July. And then these tawny seed heads will appear later, and they will linger on the plant into February. And the plant itself can provide both cover and food for birds. Switchgrass has many cultivars in the horticulture trade, and they will have variations in height and foliage coloration. One cultivar, Shenandoah, that's particularly popular here in Arlington, Virginia, has actually been used by Arlington County in many street side plantings. This particular cultivar is somewhat shorter. It grows about 2 to 3 feet tall, and it's notable because in the fall that foliage will take on burgundy coloration. Switchgrass is a very versatile landscape plant. It can be used as an edging for paths. Here we're using the taller North Wind cultivar as a specimen plant in archways of a building at the garden that I help to maintain. It can be used as an underplanting beneath trees. This is a very large rain garden. More uses can be used as screening. And here you see the wonderful sense of movement with the breeze blowing through those tall flower stalks. It can be used at the perimeter of rain gardens and on slopes for erosion control in a meadow. And here it's providing winter architecture in another planting in Arlington County. Another of my favorite grasses for the fall is pink muhly grass, Muhlenbergia capillaris. This is another warm season grass, so it gets a much later start, and it's blooming now, October well into November. It has a very distinctive rounded crown, so it's 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. It can grow in sun to part shade, dry to moist soil. And note that it is intolerant of winter wetness. So the suggestion is sometimes that it is better to plant it in the spring so it won't bog down if there happens to be a lot of snow cover. It is, as most of the grasses, deer resistant. For a good part of the summer, you'll see these glossy arching leaf blades. And then beginning in September and lasting on well into November, these airy rosy red plumes will appear. And they have, when they're backlit by the sun, almost the look of children's sparklers, absolutely stunning. These persisting seed plumes will last through the winter as the foliage takes on a tawny coloration. And pink muhly grass, like the switchgrass, has multiple landscape uses. Here it is at Green Spring Gardens, used as a specimen plant. At Meadowlark Gardens, it's used as a hedge. And in both of these situations, it's going to attract beneficial insects and provide perching places for butterflies, as well as cover for birds. What's particularly lovely when there is a mass planting like this is that it, with the flower heads, it really creates a lovely purple haze. More landscape uses, nice when it's interplanted in drifts with perennials. This is the U.S. Botanical Garden in DC. And I find that the best effect with this plant is to align it in such a way that the flower clusters are backlit by alternately the morning sun showing from the east, or getting the afternoon light shining from the west. It's absolutely spectacular. Another great grass lasting into the fall is little bluestem, Schizocurium scoparium. This is a clumping warm season grass. This, along with the switchgrass and Indian grass, these were three of the species that were especially prominent in the Midwestern tallgrass prairie. This is a distinctively clumping grass, 2 to 4 feet tall, and it's going to prefer full sun, dry, well-drained, lean soil. It will tolerate drought, pollution, and black walnut, but it is very intolerant of flooding. And in periods of the spring, when there were extensive sessions of heavy rain, the plant would tend to really get bowed down. As it is with the other grasses, this is deer resistant. Little bluestem, because of its name, you can see it has these light blue-green leaves on very erect stems. And I love the way this grass changes color through the seasons. It has these lovely, fluffy, silvery white seed heads, and then a very tawny bronze fall color to the foliage that lasts all the way through the winter. This particular plant, little bluestem, is a larval host for skippers and provides a protective cover for wildlife as well as seeds for birds. It has many landscape uses. Here it's appearing in a mixed perennial border. It's an accent plant in some gardens, great for rock gardens and xeriscapes because of its drought tolerance. It can be used at the perimeter of a rain garden. It's very attractive when massed in an ornamental planting on a slope. Because of its deep root system, it can help to control erosion on slopes. And of course, it can provide a wonderful structural layer in meadows. Now let's move on to the first of our categories of woody plants, the vines. The first is trumpet honeysuckle, Lonicera sempervirens. This is a vigorous twining semi-evergreen vine growing anywhere from 8 to 20 feet tall, 6 to 12 feet wide. It can grow in sun to part shade and moist soil, tolerating clay soil and black walnut. the alert that deer may browse on the leaves and the stems. Trumpet honeysuckle has these lovely clusters of tubular flowers, reddish orange with yellow centers, all the way from April to June. The reason I'm flagging it here is because it will continue to bloom intermittently into the frost. I've had it bloom in my garden as late as early December. And these flowers, with their brilliant color, are very attractive to hummers, bees, other butterflies, and it's the larval host for several species of moths. You'll see this fruit for the birds all the way into March. And one very popular naturally occurring cultivar is the John Clayton cultivar. Many folks like this, not just because of the unusual yellow color and beautiful multicolored fruit, but it is somewhat smaller. It grows only 6 to 12 feet tall and about 3 to 5 feet across. Trumpet honeysuckle is a wonderful substitute, of course, for the non-native invasive Japanese honeysuckle. It can be used as a climber on arbors or fences, or sprawling as a ground cover. This particular photo shows a planting. This must be a good 15 to 20 feet tall. This was growing on an arbor. My Master Gardener colleague, Alyssa Ford Morell, who has spoken for this group, grows it on the front of her house. It was a specially constructed trellis, and it's hinged at the top, so she can release it and lower the whole arbor down and do any maintenance, painting and so forth on the facade of her home. One other native vine is Virginia creeper, Parthenocissus quinquifolia. This is a very vigorous vine, can grow as far as 30 to 50 feet across. It's clinging and deciduous. It grows in sun to part shade, moist soil, tolerating a range of conditions, including heavy shade and black walnut. Virginia creeper has compound palmate leaves, and the way to remember how to distinguish it from the native poison ivy, some people get confused, is that poison ivy is going to have leaves of 3, and Virginia creeper will have 5 leaves, like the palm of a hand. It will attach as it grows by adhesive holdfasts at the end of the tendrils. The flowers are fairly inconspicuous, but then there'll be abundant fall fruit for birds. And just note that the fruit is toxic to humans. The reason I'm flagging this, in addition to the wonderful fruit, is the brilliant fall foliage. And this plant could be used as a ground cover for erosion or a climber on fences or walls. Now, moving on to shrubs for fall, and these are being introduced, I guess I'm trying to remember whether I'm doing it, I guess not by height, because this one is fairly tall. This one is witch hazel, the first of our plants we're considering here. This is Hamamelis virginiana, a deciduous multi-stemmed shrub. This is beginning to get into the height almost of a low tree, 15 to 20 feet tall and wide. It can grow in sun to part shade, moist soil, and tolerates heavy clay and erosion. Deer will occasionally severely damage it, and rabbits may browse on the seedlings. Witch hazel is very attractive in the fall with its yellow to pale orange fall foliage. And earlier in the season, it serves as a larval host for moths. What's unusual about this plant is these ribbon-like yellow flowers that will appear in September and last on into December. So it's the latest blooming of any of our native shrubs. And these flowers are pollinated by flies and wasps. This particular shrub is very attractive, used on a woodland edge. It can also be used as a specimen or a patio tree. Dwarf Fothergilla, sometimes referred to as witch alder, Fothergilla gardeniae, is a deciduous multi-stemmed shrub growing anywhere from 3 to 5 feet tall and wide. Again, it grows in sun to part shade, and this one prefers moist to wet soil, although I have found that it can tolerate drought in my garden. It's in a fairly sunny location since it's had several years to be established. Uh, it can also tolerate prolonged flooding. Deer may browse on the flowers and new growth. Dwarf Fothergilla has these lovely bottle brush shaped flowers. They're scented. They appear in the spring, attracting bees and wasps. And for the fall, you'll see a wonderful range of foliage color from these pastel shades to the deeper reds, maroons, and oranges. Dwarf Fothergilla is very attractive, used in the forest understory as a hedge or a foundation plant. Sweet pepper bush, Clethra alnifolia, is a deciduous shrub with a distinctively rounded form, growing anywhere from 6 to 12 feet tall. This one is interesting in that it can tolerate a range of sun exposures from sun to full shade, but it's going to prefer moist to wet soil, and it will definitely need to be receiving good amounts of rain in those sunnier locations. It can tolerate clay, can bloom even in dense shade, and also tolerates salt. Deer seldom severely damage it. Sweet pepper bush has intensely scented flowers in these white flower spikes in July and August, and these attract a wide range of pollinators, especially swallowtail butterflies. Ruby Spice is a cultivar that's a little bit shorter in height, and it's popular because it has pink flowers. There are also some shorter cultivars. Hummingbird is one, for example. It has white flowers, but it has more of a low hedge height. You're beginning to see some of the seed heads forming here. Very interesting. And they will be attractive when they're set against this yellow fall foliage. And then the fruit will continue to linger on all the way through the winter, providing food for birds. Sweet pepper bush can be used in borders, foundations, as a hedge, at a forest edge, on a slope, and it's especially well suited with its preference for moist soil in the center of rain gardens. Possum haw, Viburnum nudum, is one of several species of native viburnums. This one is multi-stemmed and can spread through suckering. It grows 5 to 12 feet tall and wide in sun to part shade. And this particular viburnum is going to prefer moist to wet acidic soil, although it will tolerate a range of soil types. The deer may sometimes browse on the twigs and leaves. Possum haw has these lovely white flower clusters. They're wide and flat topped. They appear from May to June, and they will offer pollen for bees. Then as far as interest for us in the fall, it has these lustrous leathery leaves. They are the shiniest leaves of any of the native viburnums. And as you can see, they have absolutely stunning fall color. They will earlier on in the season provide nourishment for the spring azure butterfly. Another interest for fall is this multicolored fruit. This particular fruit is very interesting. It begins developing in the summer. It will be minty green in color, then turn white, then pink, then this rosy color that you see here, then blue, and even a deep black. And as it ripens and dries, you can see why the plant is sometimes referred to as wild raisin. So this fruit will ripen from July to October and be enjoyed by the birds. Possum haw can be used as a hedge in rain gardens, by streams and ponds, in mixed borders, or at a woodland edge. I'd like to make a quick reference to several other species of native viburnums, both of interest for their fall color and their fruit. Arrowwood, Viburnum dentatum, has wonderful, abundant fruit, and birds will enjoy sitting on power lines, taking a look for safety, and then diving down into my group of shrubs. These are mine right here along my front fence line. And they will just dive deep into the shrub and really enjoy the fruit. And then here's a look at the beautiful red-orange color to the foliage in the fall. Maple leaf viburnum, Viburnum acerifolium, also has gorgeous fall color. It's more of a pinkish purple. And black haw, Viburnum prunifolium, the tallest of our native viburnums, more of a tree height, close to 12 to 15 feet. That will turn color and also has wonderful fruit. Another great plant, both for foliage and fruit, is red chokeberry, Aronia arbustifolia. This is a deciduous shrub, very upright, growing 6 to 10 feet tall and about 3 to 5 feet across. This one I find even more than the black chokeberry, Aronia melanocarpa, will tend to sucker quite a bit to form colonies. This one can grow in sun to part shade and moist soil, tolerates clay soil and even wet conditions, and luckily deer seldom severely damage it. You'll see these lovely white flowers with pink stamens in April, providing nectar for pollinators. Then the fruit will ripen in October, and this fruit will actually last on into the winter for birds. This particular species of fruit isn't the first that's consumed by the birds. It needs to go through sequences of freezing and thawing to make it a little more palatable for them. But here in the photo on the right, you can see how absolutely stunning the fall foliage is. And it's very attractive when grouped in shrub borders and woodland areas or used beside ponds or streams. American beautyberry, Calicarpa americana, is a distinctly vase-shaped shrub with arching branches. It grows 3 to 6 feet tall and is even wider, 6 to 8 feet across. This grows best in sun to part shade and is intolerant of deep shade. It just won't flower and fruit in those very shady conditions. It likes moist soil. Note that deer occasionally will severely damage it. American beautyberry has very large, wide-toothed leaves. They can measure up to 8 inches long. And they are now being studied for their insect repellent properties. One of the chemicals, calicarpanol, has been used as an insect repellent in studies. And interestingly, I've read that cowboys used to crush some of these leaves, put them under the saddles of their horses to ward off the flies. American beautyberry has these lovely pinkish lavender flowers. They will grow completely surrounding the stems from June to August, attracting bees and butterflies. But the really outstanding feature for us, of course, in the fall, are these brilliant drupes. They begin to show in September. And they are wonderful not only for us, but for our songbirds. Over 40 species of songbirds will use them as nourishment to help fuel their migration. I'd like to mention that quite often this plant is confused with the non-native Japanese beautyberry. And here's a few ways to distinguish between them. The American beautyberry leaves are considerably larger. The flowers completely surround the stems rather than appearing just along the top of the stems. And the fruit similarly appears all the way around the stems. American beautyberry is very effective in naturalized landscapes, and it does its best fruiting when it's planted in a group for cross-pollination. Winterberry, Ilex verticillata, is a deciduous holly with a rounded form. It grows 6 to 12 feet tall. in sun to part shade. It likes moist to wet soil, tolerates clay, shade, and air pollution. Note again that deer occasionally damage it. Winterberry has quilted foliage, and the flowers will appear in June to July. Now, an important thing to know about winterberry is that it is a dioecious species. So the particular flowers that I'm showing here are the female flowers. They have white petals and a distinctive rounded center that's green. You would see lots of stamens with pollen on the male flowers. Now, because it's dioecious, you're going to want to look for matched pairs of cultivars. So, for example, you would choose red sprite, a female shrub, and match it with Jim Dandy, the male. The pollen would be carried from Jim Dandy to the red sprite, and therefore the fruit would be able to form. There is a very attractive orange color fruit on winter gold, and the male match for that particular plant is Southern Gentleman. So you want to make sure that the males are going to be blooming at the same time as the females. One male can service quite a number of females. They can be planted either side by side like this, as long as they're planted within 40 to 50 feet of each other. The pollen can be carried to the female plants. And then you'll see this wonderful fruit on the female plants from late August into winter. And this is really an outstanding source of nutrition for 48 species of birds. Native shrubs are going to provide the really wonderful lipid-rich content for the fueling the flight of the birds as they're migrating. Winterberry can be used in a woodland garden, as a hedge, in a rain garden, or on a bank to control erosion. And here are a few other shrubs, very attractive for their fall color. The first is oakleaf hydrangea, Hydrangea quercifolia. This is actually strictly native further south. It's native to the southeast, but it does grow well here, and it's now become quite popular in the horticulture trade. But as you can see, it has absolutely outstanding fall color, and that is stunning when it's setting off the dried flower heads. Virginia sweetspire, Itea virginica. The straight species grows about 6 to 12 feet tall, but there are quite a few shorter cultivars, including Henry's garnet, Little Henry, Scentlandia, Merlot. And this plant is wonderful for its fall foliage. To my mind, rivals the non-native and invasive burning bush. And another great choice, this is a shorter plant, is the grow low cultivar of fragrant sumac, Rhus aromatica. This grows about 18 inches to 3 feet tall. And as you can see, it spreads quite wide, making a wonderful hedge. And it also has brilliant fall color. Now moving on to trees that are especially attractive in the fall. Flowering dogwood, Cornus florida, now has a new scientific name, and I'm just beginning to get used to this. I've been used to Cornus for so long, but apparently Cornus now is just being used for the plants that are strictly cherries, and the others are being siphoned off into other genera. So this particular one is now Benthamidia florida. Flowering dogwood, of course, is notable for its attractive horizontal branching. I'm listing these trees by height, from short to tall. So this is the shortest, 15 to 30 feet tall. Now, some people tend to want to use this in their front yards, but this is really an understory tree, and to my mind, it's going to do best in part shade, maybe along a woodland edge. It's very important that a flowering dogwood have moist soil because it's intolerant of heat and drought. And when the plant is stressed by those conditions, that's when it may be more prone to disease. Unfortunately, deer may severely damage this tree. Of course, we're all familiar with the lovely flowers. Now, the true flowers of dogwood are actually the little greenish flowers that you're seeing in the center, bordered by the white bracts. Sometimes the bracts can be pink in color. And then, of course, for the fall, these wonderful drupes that are eaten by songbirds. And they're set against lovely fall foliage. Flowering dogwood can be used as a specimen, patios, and especially effective in woodland and naturalistic gardens. American holly, Ilex opaca, of course, is a wonderful evergreen selection, pyramidal in shape, growing 15 to 40 feet tall. This is another dioecious species, so you'll want to have a male and a female planted at least within 200 feet of each other. Perhaps you would be lucky enough, let's say you have a female, there might be a male plant somewhere else in the neighborhood. American holly grows in sun to part shade, moist soil, and because of those prickly leaves, deer will rarely severely damage it. Of course, it's notable for the fruit that appears from October to the winter time, and it's enjoyed by 18 species of birds. Great for use either as a specimen or as a tall hedge. There is a cultivar, Maryland dwarf, that is actually shrub-like. It grows only 2 to 3 feet tall, so it's more like the height of that grow low sumac. But the interesting thing is that it can spread, like the grow low, it can spread quite wide, 3 to 10 feet across. It will have the same flowers and the same fruit as the straight species tree. Cockspur hawthorn, Crataegus crusgalli, has horizontal thorny branches. It grows 20 to 35 feet tall, preferring sun and moist soil. It will tolerate drought, and it does well in urban conditions. Deer, despite the thorns, will sometimes browse the twigs. You'll see these wonderful flowers, very abundant from April to May. And then of interest for us, discussing the fall, are these plums, the fruit that appears. And this will last all the way through to February. So this is a picture of a tree in a Master Gardener colleague's front yard. So here you see it in the fall, but when the leaves drop, the fruit will remain, and it's continuing to provide wonderful ornamental interest. In addition to the fruit, this particular tree provides nesting material and with its dense branches, cover for birds. It can be used as an ornamental accent, grouped as a barrier hedge, or used for erosion control on slopes. Black gum, Nyssa sylvatica, is a tree with a variable shape as it begins to reach its mature height of 30 to 70 feet. It grows in sun to part shade, preferring moist to wet soil, although it can tolerate drought once well established. Deer seldom severely damage it, but they may browse on the twigs. You'll see this bluish fruit in September and October, but the truly outstanding feature for us is the brilliant fall foliage. This is a great tree. In addition to the fruit, it's going to provide nesting habitat for birds, and its nectar is the source of Tupelo honey. Black gum can be used as either a lawn or a street tree. Eastern red cedar, Juniperus virginiana, is nice because it gives us an evergreen selection. It's an evergreen conifer. Mature height, 30 to 60 feet. This is often dioecious. It prefers sun and dry to moist soil, tolerates drought, heat, wind, pollution, and black walnut. And luckily, deer rarely severely damage it. This particular tree provides great food and shelter for mammals and birds. Here are the berry-like cones on the female trees. You'll see them from July all the way through winter into March. And of course, the tree has wonderful peeling bark, kind of a silvery color. This can be used as a specimen, a tall hedge, or a windbreak. Bald cypress, Taxodium disticum, is a deciduous conifer growing 50 to 70 feet tall in sun to part shade. It's going to prefer moist to wet soil, and we often think of it as growing actually standing in water. It can tolerate clay and wet soil, strong winds, as well as pollution, and deer rarely severely damage it. You'll see these very interesting cones in October lasting into December. And there's absolutely spectacular fall color, a range from golden to butterscotch and orange. So the tree is great for wildlife. The seeds are inside those cones. It also provides nesting sites for birds. We can use it as a lawn tree in large spaces or in wet areas. Now, I'm not picturing it here, but when it's growing, standing in water or close to a pond, uh, bald cypress will form what we refer to as knees, sometimes even several feet tall. Um, these apparently are structures that can help deliver oxygen to the roots when the tree is actually standing in water. Now, if you're using this in the lawn, there may be just a very flat, very low formation that would be the beginning of the knees. But you could use a string trimmer around that. It's not going to cause any great big tall growth. Another great tree for fall is shagbark hickory, Caria ovata. This one has a characteristically straight trunk, very long-lived. It grows 60 to 80 feet tall in sun to part shade and moist soil. It can tolerate two extremes, occasional drought, as well as flooding, and deer will rarely severely damage it. It's notable, of course, for its exfoliating bark. And I understand that in addition to some insects, in certain parts of the country, bats will actually hibernate. They'll find shelter under that peeling bark. This tree can also provide nesting and cover for birds. It's a great host plant for Lepidoptera, one of the top ranked woody plants by Doug Tallamy. And of course, it will form in its mature height. It will form nuts in the fall. This, of course, you would use as an ornamental shade tree on a large property. And to conclude, I'd like to mention several sources of native plants. For those of us in Northern Virginia, I refer to the Plant Nova Natives website. It has lists of native-only sellers that are found locally, as well as some that are even a little further afield in Central Virginia. And it also lists some mail-order nurseries. And then for folks who may be attending from other parts of Virginia, I've I provided a link on the handout to the Virginia Native Plant Society's website, where it lists native plant nurseries throughout the state. And if anyone happens to be attending from Maryland, I've also been listing the Maryland Native Plant Society as a good source. Are there any questions at this point?
The only one that I've seen, Elaine, is someone is asking if you would let her have, or them to have copies of some of the slides.
Is this for personal use or for?
I don't know. Whoever is iPad, do you want to unmute for a second and tell us?
Hi, yes, it's just for my edification. So I've tried to take as many notes, but pictures really help me. It's just for my use.
This
Okay.
is being recorded, so you will be able to watch it again.
Yes, what I often do when I really enjoy a presentation, especially if I'm lucky enough to have a recording, I will actually stop the recording and I'll take a screenshot. And you're certainly welcome to do that. I don't generally share the slides with the public at large.
Yeah, that's what I do too.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else have any questions? Up there we go. Our dogwood hasn't been watered all summer. What do you suggest now in the drought?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the first thing you want to do is to start giving it some water. I was mentioning how this particular tree is very intolerant of heat and drought. It's an understory tree. I hope your tree maybe has a bit of shade. If it does, that would be very helpful. We actually have a tree in one of our demonstration gardens, a dogwood tree, that for many years was growing under the protection of a very tall canopy maple tree. Unfortunately, that tree had to come down. It was beginning to get diseased. And so the county took it down. And so now this poor dogwood over the summer when we had the heat dome was just exposed to this brutal heat, and it actually died back. So now that we're beginning to get these kinds of very challenging conditions with climate change, this is a tree that you would really want to site as much as possible where it can get some shade. But as far as things you can do for the tree, if there are periods of drought, be sure to give it supplemental water. This summer, more than any other summer I can remember, I've been giving supplemental water. I've tended to tell people that native plants, once they're well established, can handle some drought conditions. Certain ones can, but this summer I've just been providing a lot more water. Another thing you can do is to provide a nice coating of mulch around the base of the tree. Of course, you don't want it up against the trunk because that could cause moisture to form there and rotting. But a good 3 inches or so at least, and ideally, if you can, have that reach all the way to the drip line of the tree, the outer edges of the branches. So if you have mulch all year round, especially I would suggest maybe the shredded bark mulch, water first, and then put that mulch down, keep it there all year round. And just whenever there are periods of extreme drought, even if you're not watering other plants, just maybe look and give the dogwood some extra water. So hope you can pull your dogwood through.
Okay, someone else is asking if you're available for future Zoom presentations to master gardening groups, and if so, how we would contact you.
Okay, I can give you my direct email. It's Elaine Mills. So my email is emills@rksystems.com. That's my husband's software company. Another way that you could reach me if you lose track of that is to go to the Master Gardeners of Northern Virginia website. That's found at mgnv.org. And I think under programs, there is a listing for our Speakers Bureau, and you could contact me through the Speakers Bureau. I don't know if you're looking for talks on any particular topics. I have probably given 20 different presentations since 2020 when we transitioned to giving a lot of Zoom talks. I've given talks on gardening for climate change. I've given talks on a wide range of native plants. I've given talks on trees, on shrubs, on grasses, sedges, and rushes, on ground covers for sun and shade. I've given talks for different seasons. So this is the one for fall. I have one on spring ephemerals, one on perennials, showy perennials for summer. I have a talk on native plants for winter interest. A talk that was very well received that I gave this past spring was on native plants and cultivars. Many people ask me questions about the value of cultivars. As I've been introducing some of them in this presentation, I've tried to indicate which ones seem to fulfill the requirements that we're looking for as providing good support for our wildlife. But in that particular talk, I went into great detail. I spent about 6 months looking at every report I could find on distinctions between the benefit that's provided by the straight species and the cultivars. One important thing to know is that some plants that are eventually named as cultivars are actually naturally occurring plants. 2 of them that I mentioned in this talk, Gina, the garden phlox, and the John Clayton, the yellow flowering honeysuckle. Those were naturally occurring. They just occurred through modifications, just natural modifications through genetic reproduction, sexual reproduction. Many of the cultivars that we're seeing in the horticulture trade now have been created through very systematic breeding. And those who are doing this breeding are mainly thinking about what characteristics are going to be of interest to gardeners. More abundant flowers, flowers that bloom a longer period of time, shorter plants that will be more appropriate for a smaller garden, plants that are disease resistant, especially mildew resistant. And they're not always thinking about the characteristics that are important as far as providing nectar and pollen, the right kind of foliage that can feed the caterpillar stages of our Lepidoptera. So anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying I end up talking about a lot of different studies and scientific plant trials. So that's a talk that I've given as well. Are there any particular, you could unmute and tell me, are there any particular topics you're looking for?
Maybe, I don't know who was it that asked?
Oh, it was my question.
Okay.
Yes.
No, this was just excellent. So I assumed you had others, and yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Is there a particular master gardener group you're looking to have a talk?
Master gardeners. So
Which one?
Norfolk. So we're
No-
Norfolk gardeners.
Norfolk?
Norfolk. Okay. I've given talks for a number of different groups. I'm slated, in fact, to give that species cultivar talk for the Northern Neck master gardeners. So I have spoken to a number of different groups. And then just this past summer, I gave a presentation. That was more of a landscaping talk that I gave at Master Gardener College. So yeah, I give talks mainly on what I would consider sustainable landscaping, native plants, and then the other subtopics would be the climate change gardening and the species and cultivars.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Any other questions?
there is someone, Witch Hazel has those cute little galls on it, and she feels that it is affecting the health of the shrub or tree and what she can do. I Googled it really quick if you don't have the answer.
Now, I thought of that as just something that frequently occurs, but
Yeah.
if you have any recommendations from your research, that would.
But it's saying that if you really feel you have to, you could use a horticultural oil during the what did it say, the winter months? And I think that one was from the University of North Carolina, because but they're let's see.
It's something that you'll see, fairly frequently on that particular species.
Once they're there, the problem is you want to spray them in the next season before they come. It's not so much spraying them now because you can't get rid of the one that's there by spraying.
Okay, Good. Thank you for
But
researching that.
any help desk, if you're not a master gardener, any help desk for any unit can help you with that question too. Does anyone else have any more questions for Elaine?
Elaine, this is Liz White from up here in Loudoun County. My
Yes.
question is the questions we get at our garden clinics is with the sustained heat and sustained drought. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at, trying to understand that, have a better knowledge base for that we can go to. So I understand you did already do some talks on that, but it would be real helpful because I think that may be more of the issue that comes about is what plants can produce some kind of presence in the garden that are native, but also be able to tolerate that heat and drought that we experienced, especially this year and last year.
Right. One of my talks, I've given several talks. I've mentioned the ones that I've given for seasons. I've also given several talks for different growing conditions. So I gave one on what I refer to as best plants for wet conditions. Then the one that might be of interest would be best plants for dry conditions.
Yeah.
So I go into a lot of detail, all different types of plants. So there'll be ground cover plants, there'll be grasses, there'll be shrubs and trees. I try to really zero in on the ones that can be most tolerant of those conditions. I also wrote a series of articles. If you go to the Master Gardeners of Northern Virginia website, in the sidebar on the right-hand side, there are listings of certain series of articles. So I wrote a bunch of articles on regional gardens. But the series I'm referring to is one on climate change. And I wrote 12 articles, one a month, that appeared, I think it was in 2022, but they're still up there on the website. And so I do have discussion about dealing with some of the extreme conditions in that article, as well as in that presentation.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I don't see any more questions unless someone has them. We will be sending out an evaluation that we asked you to return once it's done. It'll be in a day or two. And this recording will be up on our website soon as well. So say if you Google PWC Gov and put hort classes, that it will be on that page.
Okay, very good. I guess one final thing I'd like to say is that it might be, I usually give this talk just a tiny bit earlier in the season, but there could still, if people are looking for things, brand new plants to add to their gardens, some of the asters and the goldenrods are still in bloom.
They are.
I mean, the aromatic aster is absolutely spectacular in my garden right now. A plant sale I attended just this past weekend had a winterberry holly that was just covered with berries, and a beautiful American beautyberry that had those spectacular magenta colored berries. So as long as you make sure to water really well, because we are going through this extended dry period now. Water before you water the plant when it's in its container, water the ground that you're going to put it in, water it really well after you plant it. But you should be able to get some of these plants in before frost. So that it might be a fun thing to add if any of these was of interest to you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Elaine. I'm so happy that you came. She did not talk about any of the stone crop sedum or anything.
Oh, stone crop? I did not talk about that. Of course, we have the native stone crop, sedum ternatum. I don't think of that as something outstanding for fall, so that's why I didn't flag that.
Right.
But that's a wonderful ground cover plant with its little star-like white flowers. But I think of that more as a spring plant.
Well, great. Like I said, the recording will be up soon. We will be sending out our survey, and we will have more classes in the future. And thanks for everybody for tuning in, and thanks to Lane so much. That was great.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Just two quick things. I'm hoping by Wednesday this should be up on our YouTube page. Fingers crossed on that one.
Yay.
The other thing that Elaine mentioned was that we are in a drought. We've been in a drought for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
The drought number kind of resets at the beginning of the year, so we've been in one long extended drought. So if you have specimen plants, water them. We are down in the last 3 inches. I would say we're down at least 1.5 feet of rainfall.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
be mindful of that, especially if you've got nice old trees, because trees aren't going to show the effects of drought for several years. So just be cognizant of that as you watch the weather. Just because we have a wet spring doesn't mean that the plants are going to be okay for the rest of the year. So like Elaine said, make sure you're watering new plants as you're putting them in.